the recount process, and so we can expect Dr. Tan Cheng Bock also back here at the Elections Department for the recounting. Now, the recounting is allowed under the Parliamentary Elections Act and the Presidential Elections Act if the vote margin between the highest two candidates is 2% or less than 2%, and as a result of that, the returning officer has allowed the recount of all the local votes which have been cast in Singapore. So it is going to take a while before we get the final results, and as we hear of Dr. Tan Cheng Bock arriving here, we will bring more reports to you from the Elections Department. Meanwhile, back to you.
Okay. Well, as we've just heard from Ramesh, a recount is right now underway in Singapore's presidential election. The Elections Department says the two candidates with the most votes are Dr. Tan Cheng Bock and Dr. Tony Tan.
And the difference is not more than 2% of the total number of valid votes cast in Singapore. So the returning officer has allowed the recounting of all votes cast.
Now, according to our reporter, sources say that Dr. Tony Tan won by about 8,000 votes and that Dr. Tan Cheng Bock asked for the recount.
Now, Dr. Tony Tan met supporters at Toa Payoh Stadium, where they have gathered. He spoke to our reporter about the recount before heading to the Elections Department, which is the principal counting centre where votes are tallied.
There will be a recount. I think that we have to wait for the official results. I ask everybody to be patient for a little while longer, and then you will hear the result. Thank you very much.
Now, Dr. Tan Cheng Bock was at Jurong East Stadium earlier, where his supporters have gathered. He addressed them before returning to the Elections Department for the recount.
It is a very close fight. Therefore, there will be a recount. I want to take leave from you. I want to go back to the election office. So it will be quite some time because this is a big exercise. Be patient, and I'll come back after the recount.
Candidate Mr. Tan Ji Se acknowledged earlier that Dr. Tony Tan and Dr. Tan Cheng Bock are leading the race, but he has not conceded defeat.
At Bedok Stadium, Mr. Tan Ji Se thanked his supporters and said even though the results are not yet out, they have already won in a way.
But it's the end of the road for Mr. Tan Kin Lien, who has conceded defeat. He told reporters that he might not get his deposit back.
Now, this could mean that he may have polled less than 12.5% of the votes cast. A candidate has to receive more than 1/8 of the ballots to get his deposit of 48,000 Sing dollars back.
Now, even though he has conceded defeat, Mr. Tan Kin Lien says he will look into different channels to convey feedback to the government.
In fact, he intends to set up a website called thevoiceofthepeople.sg to engage Singaporeans on issues that affect them the most, such as housing and public transport.
And I believe our reporters have some updates from their locations. Let's start with Ho Yi Ni at Jurong East Stadium, where Dr. Tan Cheng Bock supporters are gathered.
Well, Sharon and Melissa, over here at Jurong East Stadium, the crowd is slowly dispersing. Many of them left shortly after they found out that there was going to be a recount. And actually just a few minutes ago, Mrs. Cecilia Tan, who is Dr. Tan Cheng Bock's wife, took to the stage and apologized to everyone, saying that because of the recount, she expects that it will take another 3 or 4 hours for all 2.27 million votes to be counted. And so she, requested for people, she suggested that people go home and perhaps watch the results on television. Some of the supporters have heeded her call. They are leaving, but there are others as well who say that, they're going to stay and wait till the very end. Some of them also left for maybe a break and a supper, and they said they will come back. There's a little crowd, you might notice, huddled over on the side of the stage. That's where Mrs. Cecilia Tan as well as Dr. Tan's children are gathered together with some supporters. Dr. Tan's son, Joshua, he told me that he will be staying here through the night, or at least until the votes are all counted. We've also got the team of, counting agents. They've been on stage for the past few hours, and they will continue to be on stage for the next few hours, tabulating all the votes coming in from the elections department, and of course keeping us updated on the ground. Back to you in the studio.
Okay. And now Amir Wong joins us out of Toa Payoh Stadium, where supporters of Mr. Tony Tan, or Dr. Tony Tan, are gathered.
That's right, Mel and Sharon. Well, as Yinyi mentioned earlier, over at her stadium, is the same thing happening at my stadium over here at Toa Payoh Stadium. After Dr. Tony Tan has actually left back to the elections department, we have a number of the supporters who have either gone home to watch it on television, or who have gone out for supper and perhaps coming back later. But we still have a lot of staunch believers that are seated behind right now at the stadium, and they're just milling around and hoping to catch a glimpse of Dr. Tan when he returns later. Dr. Tony Tan has been confirmed to come back to this stadium to acknowledge his supporters later on, but ultimately he is still waiting for the final results to be announced. As my colleague earlier mentioned, as Ramesh over at the elections department, is going to take a number of hours because the initial count took about 3 to 4 hours, and so this time around, in terms of the recount, we have Dr. Tan Cheng Bock as well as Dr. Tony Tan monitoring the progress of the recount and also observing the process that is ongoing right now. So ultimately, whether or not it's going to appear in the next 1 hour, 2 hours, no one's to know. But we have a lot of people here who are not letting up, and they're refusing to go home simply because the mood is just exuberant right now, because everyone wants to know who is going to take over as the 7th president of Singapore, because the role is extremely important, not just here in Singapore, but also internationally, because the president is actually the face of the international community when it comes to Singapore. So he has a role to play in terms of enhancing the reputation, also to assure the foreign investors about the fact that Singapore is still a safe place and also politically stable when it comes to investing their money as well as their businesses here. And Dr. Tony Tan had previously said in his campaign many a times that there are a number of areas which he wants to champion, and that includes making sure and maintaining social harmony, entrepreneurship, encouraging, and also education, where he's very passionate about. So these are the few areas that the voters would have taken into consideration throughout his campaign trail to find out exactly who is the most qualified. And from the results tonight, or rather the preliminary results that we are hearing so far, perhaps Dr. Tony Tan might just be able to clinch this one.
Right, thanks for that, May. Let's find out from Imelda Saad if there's any